You probably think you know everything about the case of the century. OJ Simpson's case rocked the nation and sparked a level of divide across the nation that only the 2020 presidential elections can match, further widening the racial divide plaguing the country at the time. Race and prejudice became vital in prosecution. This case was so widely followed that even Margaret Thatcher, then Prime Minister of Britain, was said to have been interested in the case's outcome. Almost 3 decades after the murder, we revisit 11 horrific details you probably didn't know about the case, starting with how gruesome the crime was, and ending with the recent admission by Carrie Bess regarding the jury's verdict. Before we get into the bizarre details, do us a favor and smash that like button, subscribe to our channel, and tap the bell to be alerted every time we upload. Now, let's get into it. On the 12th of June 1994, Nicole Brown Simpson and Ronald Goldman were found brutally murdered around the entrance of Nicole's condo. OJ Simpson, Nicole's husband, was the prime suspect of the murder. One of the most iconic car chases in American history began when he ran from the police rather than allow himself to be arrested. The chase had a record 95 million Americans glued to their screens, watching how it would all end. Eventually, he was arrested at home and a lengthy trial ensued. By the 3rd of October 1995, the clerk of Judge Lance Ito, Deej Robertson, announced the jury's verdict: not guilty. The case had cost over $15 million and lasted 133 days, and had 150 witnesses take the stand. The murders were more horrific than you could imagine. To say the murders were brutal would be an understatement. The scene was something right out of a true crime TV drama. Nicole's body was discovered outside of her house with a severe wound to the neck, exposing her larynx and cutting into her spinal column. Her neck was almost cut completely clean off of her body. She had been stabbed 12 times. For Goldman, it wasn't pretty either. He was stabbed not once, but 25 times in his chest, abdomen, and thighs. The pictures of this gruesome scene are out on the internet, but we would not advise you to search them out. Nicole's kids were asleep in the house when she was killed. One horrifying fact in the murders of Nicole and Goldman is that the children of Nicole Simpson were home when the murders took place. Sydney and Justin, 2 of the children of OJ and Nicole Simpson, were upstairs in the condo when their mother was being brutally murdered outside their home. Thankfully, they were both asleep and did not witness the murder. Who knows? If they were awake, we could have possibly identified the killer. Or worse, we might have had a case with 4 victims. OJ Simpson threatened to kill himself in Kardashian's house. In the saga, OJ Simpson tried to commit suicide at one point. It's not confirmed if guilt made him make this decision, or if it was the stress or the loss of his wife. But what is known is that he went to Robert Kardashian's house and in the room of one of his daughters, threatened to take his own life. The facts are pretty contentious here, and no one is sure whether it was Kim or Khloe's room. In 1996, after OJ's acquittal, Robert gave an interview where he mentioned that Simpson had a gun wrapped in a towel and was in Kim's room. According to Robert, when OJ threatened to kill himself, he said, "I could never walk in this room. My daughter couldn't sleep in this bed. She'd know what happened." The man who claimed he heard Nicole's dog wail is the ghostwriter for OJ's book, If I Did It. The bark of a dog is what alerted people to the murder scene. The dog belonged to Nicole Brown Simpson, and its paws were bloody when it was found. While this is a fact, many do not know that one of the first people to hear about the dog was Pablo Finives. He was a scriptwriter who lived about 60 yards away from Nicole Simpson's house. He also ghost-wrote If I Did It, a book about the murder of Nicole and Goldman. The book was said to be a confession by OJ Simpson. Pablo mentioned that the publisher clearly stated that this was the only way he, OJ Simpson, would confess to the murder. A later claim states that OJ Simpson did not have anything to do with the book and was paid $600,000 to claim ownership of the work. Serial killer Glenn Rogers confesses to the murders. Although no one has been convicted of the murders of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman following OJ Simpson's not guilty verdict, one individual came forward and admitted to the murders. Glenn Rogers is an American serial killer known as the Cross County Killer, or the Casanova Killer. He came out to take responsibility for the killing of Nicole Simpson and Ronald Goldman. He said OJ had asked him to steal back a pair of diamond earrings. He further claimed that OJ had said to him, quote, "may have to kill the bitch." Currently, Glenn is on death row for the murder of Tina Mary Cribbs. He is known as a serial killer who targets women. His brother Clay further backed up his claim of being hired by OJ. Simpson had cash, a passport, clothes, and a fake goatee in the Bronco. In the car chase that lasted almost an hour and 30 minutes, OJ had the eyes of the nation on him. 95 million people watched as police chased after OJ 5 days after the death of his wife and Goldman. After the chase, it was discovered that OJ had forced Cowlings, a friend of his, to drive. Cowlings claimed that he was held at gunpoint by OJ as he ran from the police. After the arrest and the Bronco was searched, it was found that Simpson had intended to flee the country. He already had a fake passport, $8,000 in cash, some clothes, and a fake goatee to help in his disguise. The whole fiasco made Simpson look more and more like a guilty killer running from the law. Simpson trained in knife combat for a role before the murder. In what seemed like an unrelated fact, it was found that Simpson had been trained in knife combat a few months before the attack took place. Simpson filmed Frogmen, a TV movie backdoor pilot for NBC, about an elite unit of Navy SEALs based in Miami. Simpson played the group's leader, and as such had to go through combat training. In one scene, he even held a knife to his daughter's throat, thinking she was an intruder. Learning of this past training only fueled to speculation that he could have been the killer who had stabbed his ex-wife and Goldman to death. He reportedly confessed to the murders while in jail. During the trial, did you ever hear the name Rosie Grier mentioned? He is a former football player and spiritual advisor to OJ at the time. He became one of the prosecution's witnesses, and later testified against the defendant after a conversation he had with OJ during a visit in prison was revealed. Jeff Stewart, a prison guard, heard the exchange. He claimed that while guarding the visitor's area, he heard OJ slam the phone down and yell, "I didn't mean to do it. I'm sorry." He also recalled Grier, after a second or so, Stewart recalled, shouted, "OJ, you gotta come clean. You gotta tell somebody." The guard also recalled that OJ was visibly shaken and crying at the time. OJ had a history of violence. Simpson had pleaded no contest to domestic violence before the murder charges, long before the murder of Nicole Simpson. It was a fact that OJ Simpson had been assaulting Nicole. He was even charged and convicted for his crime. Nicole was hospitalized after being beaten so severely by him in 1989 that police were called, and when they arrived, she ran out of the bushes screaming, "He's going to kill me, he's going to kill me." After the accusations were leveled against him during the trial, he pleaded no contest and was sentenced to 120 hours of community service and 2 years probation. This could have been seen as OJ's predisposition to violence against his wife, and some would later link to his murder. Simpson lied about the evidence. During the crime scene investigation, shoe prints were found to fit Bruno Magli, the size of OJ's feet. When OJ was first questioned by the police about shoe prints found, he said it was not his, and that he would never wear those ugly shoes. Pictures of him wearing those exact shoes at Bill's game were later found during an investigation, and they played a significant role in the civil procedure that followed afterward. Had they found that photograph before the criminal trial, that could have been a game changer. He lost the civil case instituted afterward. After Simpson was acquitted, he gained custody of his children and promised to help find the real killers of his wife. A few months later, he was slammed with a civil case from the family, a case he lost and was ordered to pay $35 million. The bars for conviction are much lower in a civil case, and the defendant was prevented from playing the race card, as it was used in the previous trial. He has yet to pay the full amount, owing nearly $60 million to the family. So far, he's only paid about $130,000. The not guilty verdict was payback for Rodney King. After the judgment was passed, there were sentiments to the effect that the case was decided in OJ's favor because Rodney King was a victim of police brutality about 4 years before the commencement of the OJ Simpson case. This case sparked anger and unrest in the city of Los Angeles, leading to the infamous LA riots. The officers Stanley Kuhn, Lawrence Powell, Timothy Wind, Theodore Brazeno, and Ronaldo Solano were all acquitted, leaving people across the world, and especially in LA, stunned and furious. In a recent interview with Carrie Bess, a juror at the trial, she admitted to the fact that the case of Rodney King influenced the decision of some of the jurors. Eventually, she acknowledged that the police brutality towards Rodney King influenced her decision. Considering that most of the jury was black, this might have impacted the actual verdict. While people are still divided on the guilt of OJ and the death of Nicole and Goldman, some believe a small measure of justice was served when OJ was sentenced for robbery and kidnapping. At the end of the day, the justice system worked. Or did it? Enjoyed this? Give us a like and follow the channel for more bizarre stories. Drop your opinions in the comment section about the case itself and what you found most horrifying. Thanks for watching, and bye for now.